Hello there everybody and welcome to the SA Anatomy channel. My name is Savvy, and for this one we're just going to be talking a little bit about retopology, and we're going to have a look at how I tackled remodeling this leopard skeleton. I'm just going to give you some tips and tricks on retopology as well. Let's get started. So if you've retopologized any model, then you know that retopology is just not fun. It is a long process, it is tedious. More often than not, you find yourself trying to come up with many ways of speeding up the process, trying to look for shortcuts, and unfortunately sometimes you just have to do the grindy work. You have to sit there and just retopologize the entire model. Sometimes yes, depending on the model that you're working on, you can use certain tools. There are shortcuts that you can use, but unfortunately this doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you just have to do the hard work. Nowadays there are many add-ons and plugins that you can get. You can use them in Blender, ZBrush, or whatever 3D software you are using, whatever 3D software of your choice. There are many plugins that you can use to either speed up the retopology process or to do the entire retopology process through that plugin or through that add-on, which is great at some point. But I feel like you still need to do the hard work in order to fully understand, okay, why is retopology really important? And you kind of have a lot more control when you are the one planning the retopology, when you are actually doing it piece by piece, polygon by polygon. But honestly, what I just said is mainly for people who haven't really dived into retopology, like heavy retopology before, or they probably haven't really done it that much and they've just been using remeshing tools. Like in ZBrush we have ZRemesher, and you've just been using that all the time. You haven't really done it manually. It'll be much harder for you once you go into a project, say for example at work, and they give you a project where you are limited with the amount of tools that you can use. Now you have to, for example, learn how to retopologize properly as you're working on this project. So I feel like what I just said is should be for people that haven't really done retopology before. If you understand topology and you've retopologized enough and you just understand that, okay, this is a tedious process and you'd like to cut it out of your work process, then go ahead and use as many tools as you like. But just make sure that you do understand topology at some point. Now for this model, there are only a couple of bones that I use Blender standard remesher, and then still had to jump in and do some cleanups here and there because it just wasn't perfect or it wasn't close enough. There were some unwanted triangles here and there. So for the other parts, I manually retopologized. There are some bones that I grouped together because it was much easier to retopologize them as groups rather than piece by piece. Others, such as the vertebrae, for example, I literally made one model and then I just kept duplicating along that line and just kept reshaping it for each vertebrae piece. The best thing to do, usually for me, whenever I'm retopologizing or even when I'm modeling out characters or just anything really, you want to plan everything. Well, almost everything. You want to plan out how your topology is going to look, how it's going to flow, the edge flow in the end. This helps you understand the model that you're trying to retopologize a lot, because sometimes it feels overwhelming when you see this huge model with all this crazy detail everywhere and you just don't know how you're going to retopologize it, and then you just kind of get stuck at some point. So planning it out breaking it apart piece by piece and then planning each piece out helps a lot. And then you can finally start by one small bit of the model or one small part of the model, and then you just keep growing like that, and you just keep duplicating or continuing the process that you've now kind of gotten used to from the first part of the model where you've planned everything. And in Blender, annotations help a lot with planning. All you do is just set it to draw on a surface, and then you just start marking things out on your high resolution, start planning everything, such as your edge flow, your topology, how you want everything to be, how you want it to look, like what I'm doing right now. And then you just start following those guidelines when you start extruding things out. Now, the way I tend to speed up the retopology process is using shrink wrap modifiers. You can honestly use them all the time whilst retopologizing, and you can use them in a really smart way. You can have the shrink wrap modifier on and choose to select vertice by vertice or edge by edge or face by face, whatever you choose, and you actually start moving the mesh around. Or you can cover a large surface area of the mesh using a simple box or a basic shape whilst having the shrink wrap modifier on and just tweaking the settings, either using project or other settings. And just like before, I'm just going to use the annotations here to plan out the topology just to see exactly what works, what I want at the end. I also did forget to mention that I use a combo of subdivision modifiers along with the shrink wrap modifier. Sometimes I throw in the solidify modifier here and there if I really wanted some depth. So what the shrink wrap modifier does, obviously shrink wraps onto the mesh, and then the subdivision modifier adds subdivisions, and then I can sort of draw out topology. I can start cutting or adding loops around wherever I want. It's much easier to control when you know that the actual mesh that you're working on is low res, and then at the end I just apply the subdivision modifier and the shrink wrap modifier, and then we have a better result at the end. Sometimes you do have to clean up the mesh, but it's much easier to use this method than to just retopologize everything piece by piece as well. You can kind of split pieces up and choose certain shapes that are a little strange for you to work with if you're using the shrink wrap modifier, and you can actually have them as separate objects, and then you can target that specific face or that specific shape and then shrink wrap onto that, apply the shrink wrap, merge the object with your the strange shape with your main object, and then just join everything together. In this project, I've used this method quite a bit. It helped me to just get over or finish a certain piece much quicker. It's also very important to always try and follow the shape of the high-res model that you are retopologizing over. So what I mean by that is, if you have something that's extruding outwards, for example, over here you see with this shape, you can sort of draw a path over certain parts of the model and try to keep that flow. It's just much neater, it's cleaner, it's much easier to control, and it's much easier to read. That actually helps a lot when you want to add detail or you want to remove detail. So if your topology is flowing correctly and you want to add edge loops around a certain area, it's much easier for you to go around that area now when you just add an edge loop. Or if you wanted to bevel a certain edge, or you wanted to remove certain details around a certain loop. So it's much easier if you follow the path, if you make it as clean as possible. It's also important to know exactly what you can fake with textures, for example. So say you know that, okay, you can fake this bump or extrusion or indent using a normal map or a height map, then there's no need for you to really put that detail in the mesh if you know that, okay, you're going to take the high resolution data and bake it down into a texture and then use that to extrude certain areas, and that's fine. You don't really need to model out that area or model out that shape or extrusion or whatever. You can also try to remember exactly what the viewers are going to see or what they're going to be able to see. So if I know that there's going to be an area of the skeleton that you will probably never see unless you take the skeleton apart, then I'll rather just not model that area out at all. I'll just leave it as a whole, like just keep it cut out. Or for example, some areas where the viewers will see more will have a lot more detail than other areas. To make this a lot easier for myself, I also chose to group bones piece by piece, and then I actually retopologized them all together. So I had the vertebrae split into certain segments, and then I grouped those bones together, retopologized those, and then I kept moving on. So this is also what I was saying before. I did choose to model out one piece of the vertebrae, and then I extruded, or I duplicated that piece multiple times, and then I changed the shape, used a shrink wrap on it, and then also did some remeshing here and there as well for certain parts of the vertebrae. What you can also do right at the end of a remesh, after using your remesher or whatever plugin that you have, you can shrink wrap still on the high resolution just to kind of contain that shape. Just make sure that the shape is still the same. And here at the end here, you can see I'm just going through all the bones that I've worked on just to make sure that everything does look clean, it looks neat. I've grouped most of them, and I hope you've learned a lot. I hope that some of the things that I mentioned here kind of spark something, and I hope to see you in the next one.